Thank you for joining this session. Actually, this is my very first session at this conference because I arrived to Tallinn just an hour ago, to Estonia, first time in my life. And I was here about 30 minutes before, but my journey started yesterday at 7 a.m. So it was quite a long way to get here, and I'm happy that, although I'm not from Tesla, so maybe that's why I arrived, but I am here. Okay, so I believe that you came here to hear something about OpenUI5, or at least if you are just attending the user interface, user experience track, then this is the only choice that you got for this hour. Anyway, thanks for joining. But before we go into this topic, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Vitaliy Rudnytskiy. I was born in Ukraine, but I spent most of my life living in Poland. I created my Twitter handle, Sigismundovich, before I actually knew how to use Twitter, so no one can really remember it. On the other hand, once someone just put it into their contacts, it's enough just to type SYG, and usually my Twitter pops up. I work at SAP in the team that is responsible for so-called developer center. This is developer.sap.com. And I've been technology consultant for about 14 years of my so-called career. And I was mostly focused on analytics and data management, but any other topic, technology topic, is interesting for me as well. And I do live in Wrocław, as I mentioned, in Poland. Anyone knows where Poland is? Okay. Anyone knows where Wrocław is? Yeah. Oh, cool. Are you from Wrocław?
I'm from Belarus.
Okay. Yeah, just as close as from Tallinn. Okay. Then here's just a little help, just to help you to figure out. So if this is the Poland, this is kind of like Wrocław is in the south west corner. And if you didn't know where exactly Wrocław is, it's understood. Yesterday, before leaving my home at kind of like 7 a.m., I decided that I know where Tallinn is. It is in Estonia. I know where Estonia is. But actually, what is the weather there? Because in Wrocław, it is currently like plus 10 Celsius. So at last moment, I decided to check the weather, and it was -1. I thought, oh, shoot, I don't know where my winter shoes are. So I had to run to the basement and to start looking for my warm shoes. So if you will decide to come to Wrocław, remember it is about 10 degrees warmer. Okay. As I mentioned, I am working for SAP, and if you don't know SAP or don't know SAP, we are a big company with many lawyers. So before I say anything about what I'm here to talk about, I urge you to read this disclaimer. And pretending that you are reading this, just in a nutshell, it basically says that whatever I tell you here, it cannot be influencing your decision to make any purchase of any SAP products or services. Anyhow, I'm here to talk about open source software, so I hopefully do not influence your purchase anyhow. But anyway, this is the official disclaimer, and now we can talk about more funny stuff. Anyone of you ever seen screen like this or used the screen like this? 2, 3. Okay, I share your pain. This is basically our traditional SAP user interface that has been out there for quite many years, I believe, and through all my years of career, this is what I was mostly doing. I was implementing SAP software for customers and forcing them to use this. Are we recording? Okay, then I will not be using any bad words, but so I was forcing people to use screens like this. The funny thing, though, that I personally had for the first time to use as a user this screen only 2 years ago, and since then I'm really apologetic for anyone who had to deal with this one. But nevertheless, I mean, it worked well. It worked well for dozens of years. Actually, after working with this kind of interface, I really liked it. You know, the moment you know how to kind of like deal with this, you actually start even liking this, and you start liking some features of this, like, you know, that it is written in SAP ABAP language, and it is kind of like interpreted, compiled language where you can always look into the code behind the screen, and you can find easily what table this data is coming from, and it is quite easily to do performance trace and so on and so forth. So there were some quite good things from IT perspective with this screen, but obviously for most of the users it was just German engineering nightmare to work with. So the world is moving on, and we had to review and redo our user interface. It is not something that can happen overnight, but basically this is what we call SAP Fiori. I don't know if anyone have ever used this or ever seen this, but this is basically our new UI standard that we are slowly moving to. And obviously, as for any modern application, and in our case it is still mostly business application, we need to make it likable. Let's put it this way. This time it should be likable by users, not necessarily to be likable by IT guys. But I believe I'm speaking here to IT guys, and I will try to show you that this is likable from IT perspective as well. So this is, let's say, the journey that we are moving to, and obviously it all driven by several factors that are happening on the market right now. So first thing is mobilization, right? So I'm carrying with me, besides laptop now, obviously phone and tablet. Some colleagues of mine, they have 2 phones and 2 tablets, and you know, it all depends on the rucksack that you want to bring with you, and how big your pockets are, and how cool you want to be. But kind of like this little stuff became the reality, and obviously it became as well the interface for business applications. And although there are some cool guys who are trying to run this very first old screen that I showed you, this sub GUI screen on tablets, it is kind of like, you know, like running Atari 8-bit games on modern laptops, just because, you know, you feel some kind of nostalgia for that. Okay, so this is kind of like how it looks like, or how it's supposed to look like from the user perspective now, but basically what is behind this new screen. So in the past, this SAP GUI interface, the old one, it was built with SAP proper programming language, which was called ABAP, and it was server-side rendering that was just displaying at the end in user thin client, and this thin client is about 1 gigabyte download if you want to get it. So this new brave world is obviously moving away from those paradigms, and first of all, these new screens we are building and extending using the thing that is called SAP UI5. And SAP UI5 is a library of JavaScript UI library. Anyone of you used JavaScript ever? Okay. The reason why I asked is obviously you used, I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be probably here at this session or on this track, but kind of like 10 years ago, it was a shame to know JavaScript, right? If any of you programmed 10 years ago. These days, it is a shame not to know JavaScript, right? I mean, you can like it or not, and there are different views, but basically it is kind of like the most common language, even I believe by GitHub statistics at the moment, right? So it is JavaScript UI library with really huge number of UI controls, and by huge, okay, it's 180 controls at the moment that you can use, so it is quite significant number of controls, and it is the one that is designed for responsive design of the web applications, right? So once again, as I mentioned, and we'll be showing later on as well, right now you need to have a web application that is running and looking and behaving the same, be this desktop, be this your tablet, or be this your smartphone. Then obviously it is using all the fancy stuff like MVC and data binding and templating that we will be talking about, the enterprise grade, and I will explain this in a little bit more during the session as well. And then it has to run on most of the current browsers. So by current browser, we assume Internet Explorer 9 and later, and as well as any other kind of like popular popular web browser, be this Chrome, be this Safari, be this Mozilla Firefox, and so on. As well as on, as I mentioned, on touch devices, and it is using the whole bunch of open source inside this library. So there are, if I'm not mistaken, about 20 different open source things that we put already inside. But kind of like you may ask, why hell are you talking about SAP UI5 if we came here and the title of this session was talking about OpenUI5? So the good thing is that we've been developing this for last couple of years for our internal purposes, and then a month ago we made it available as an open source for contribution via the GitHub. So it is kind of like fully open sourced code for building this modern web UIs where you can use it. You can use it in your commercial closed source applications. You can contribute to it through GitHub. So all these good things. Yeah. So if you will see anywhere kind of like interchanging SAP UI5 or OpenUI5, it is kind of like almost the same. It's just that SAP UI5 is still kind of like our commercial product, which has, comparing to OpenUI5, just a few very exotic, very SAP-specific extensions, right? But other than that, it is pretty much the same. So, OpenUI5. There is no way to talk about anything without showing hello world, or in our case, hello Topconf code. So basically, unfortunately, I do not see it really well, but so this is just kind of like one-page web app that mix HTML and JavaScript in one place. And what it does, it basically loads the SAP UI core library. It tells which theme to use, which sub-libraries will be used, and then basically we are running the shell, which is a component, kind of like central component for the application, and we put the button on this with the text hello Topconf. And if we will be able to scale it, to scale this properly, give me a second, because if things can go wrong, they will go wrong. Okay. And it doesn't work, right? Okay. So this is the better code, which actually did execute. Right. So we have this hello Topconf Tallinn button. And then comparing to the previous code, the only thing that I added here is some functionality if we press the button, which in this case is kind of like very simple thing, of course. Hello Topconf, and then once we click, the application is getting annoyed and just like, yeah, hello again. But basically, this is just a quick snippet to show. So basically, you load the SAP UI library, kind of like a core component, you point which libraries to use, and then you are using components and SAP UI API to do this. So far, you should be kind of like really annoyed with this, because just like, okay, what the heck? Why do I need to use SAP UI for things like this? But remember, this is just a hello world. So hopefully we will get something more fancy as well. The moment we will manage to do things right. Okay. And by the way, I put as well the URLs to the code or example that I will be showing. So if anyone of you want to try it immediately on your device, be this laptop or tablet or phone, feel free to do so. Then the second thing is that, as I mentioned, is about the responsiveness, and responsive design is something that obviously everyone has been talking for at least last 2-3 years about the web design, and unfortunately I didn't manage to connect my tablet through my computer, but we still should be able to do this with just using simple cable switch. Just give me a second. Because I believe it kind of like here it is much more, much better to see what responsive design can be. So in this case, I have some dual business application that is called purchase orders. I know that it is much more fun to use exactly the same layout at the same application just to show some results, for example, from the last World Championship game, but we need to leave in this case for my demo with this one, right? So let's say this is my landscape display for this application, and then once I turn it, you see that kind of like to be able to best fit into the screen, this other panel is hidden, but I can still kind of like call it. And then, as I mentioned, this is exactly the same code, and this whole responsive design is done by the library behind this. But for example, it knows that right now I'm running this on tablet, and for example, to hide this column, it is, kind of like very natural tablet gesture to remove it. Obviously, on desktop, you will not be removing this tab with your mouse, but you just kind of like click on something to hide it. So this is just to give a very quick demo that this responsive design is indeed delivered by the library itself. And then, yeah, it is using MVC, but I believe that everyone here is just as familiar with MVC as familiar with JavaScript in general, so I do not need to go in much details here, other than just I assume that Team Estonia has their own soccer team as well. Does it? Cool. Does it play in Euro or in World Championship? Sorry, I know that it is not nice of me, but basically, you know, the Polish soccer team or football team for the first time didn't lose any match during this fall, even with Germany, and yesterday they played with Switzerland and didn't lose either. So kind of like I know that I'm just trying to annoy you, but basically here what I tried to show is that this is an example where we have an XML view and we are defining the view itself and data, everything in here, and then we are binding this through the controller, and then, you know, we are just getting this kind of like another responsive application that is using MVC. But let me move on, because basically you can explore this one and many other with just the demo kit. And so for example, I use this one demo application from here, from this demo kit, which is kind of like available on internet. And here's another interesting example. You see kind of like this responsive design out of the box. You know, when I'm changing the scale, it automatically as well, you know, moving these tiles. But basically, you will get the demo up here. You can see and check all 100 controls here, just if you want to learn. So this is the kind of the playground for this UI5. You will find the developer guide there. You will find the API there. Everything is in one place. And then besides the fact that it is delivering this 140 or 180, and I mean, it is growing all the time, and it is actually our colleagues in our Kyiv office in Ukraine who are producing these controls like crazy as well. You can still build your own custom controls just by using the API. So in this case, I have very simple control, which is called square. So basically what I'm doing to get my custom control is that I'm just defining properties, which in this case, you know, the property will be text and size. For the square, I am defining how to render this, and then I am defining what it has to do, kind of like the response, and then I'm instantiating two controls with the square. One is hello, and another one is me too. So this is pretty simple. Thing here, I believe, is a little bit more interesting. So this is as well custom control. So this whole piece is one control that has the Google map inside, and then it has OpenUI5 controls here, which allow you to play with, for example, the refresh takes quite some time. But yeah, you see we are moving. And just to show you this dual binding, so basically kind of like I can control the map with this OpenUI5 controls, or basically if I reduce the zoom, oh, we went to Russia. Weather brought us there. So if I'm moving the map, you can see that controls are moving as well, right? So this is kind of like two ways binding, data binding. And then I'm really curious where the location will bring us back to Tallinn. Yeah, so it properly recognized from the browser where we are. Okay, so this was the custom control. templating, basically I do not know if I need to demo this, but just quickly. So we have some array defined here with, in this case, German players. This example was prepared by our German colleagues, and I didn't find time to change this to some Polish names like Grzegorz Brzęszewicz, so that you can have fun reading or pronouncing them. But basically, in this case, we have the array of players, and then we are building just a simple template just to display players' first name, last name, and then this is how it would look like, kind of like in the real world with OpenUI5 templates. It should change outrun. Yep, it just read this array, and in this case, so as I mentioned, we are using the whole bunch of other open source. So this is used by using handlebars JS in OpenUI5. So really, who of you have heard about SAP before? Okay. So maybe the others will not have this question, but many people like hearing, OpenUI5 sounds like a nice UI library, but why the hell SAP? Why the hell this German, huge bureaucratic machine is coming up with something like this? So I didn't see many question marks on your faces here, luckily, but if you are talking about OpenUI5 in Germany, everyone is just like, knows or heard about the company at least once, because the company is coming from Germany, and right now about 70% of beer produced in the world is produced by companies that are using SAP. This is just to give you some kind of perception. So why SAP? Because first of all, we do use open source software ourselves. And then the second thing is actually we do contribute to open source projects as well. So we are number 2 corporate contributor, for example, to Eclipse Foundation. We are one of the 8 premium, what it is called, platinum members of Cloud Foundry Foundation. We are, doing small things like this. For example, Review Ninja, which is the piece of code that was created by our colleagues, because we have GitHub Enterprise installation inside of our company, and they wanted just to extend the GitHub functionality to do some more collaborative social review of problems. So they built, for example, this Review Ninja piece of code, and then they published this on the GitHub and just did this as an open source. And obviously OpenUI5, about which I'm talking, and Apache Olingo. I don't know if anyone familiar here with OData. So Apache Olingo is the initiative to popularize the OData protocol as an open source, right? But still, why SAP is getting involved in all this open source project? Because basically what we are bringing always to the table is what we call this enterprise grade of software, right? So we know that these pieces of open source code will be running for, by these customers worldwide. So obviously, kind of like we don't want to have bad software which will influence the taste of one of the 70% of your favorite beers in the world, right? So we need to put some extra quality assurance into this. The other thing is obviously supportability. So you can easily recognize this by the fact that, whenever you are working with OpenUI5 control, you need to press Ctrl-Alt-Shift-S. I do not know why escape you don't need to press with your nose as well. And then this will bring you this support screen, which, for example, is telling you from the kind of like UI side what is the version that you are using, or what are the libraries that are being loaded or what is your control tree, in this case, pretty simple one, or if you want to run the JavaScript trace. So this is basically the extension to this OpenUI5 library that will help you to troubleshoot once you are kind of like running your code and do not really understand why this is happening. And then obviously, because we need to bring this code to these customers worldwide, it has to support internationalization, which is basically, supporting displays in different languages, depending, for example, on your web browser setting, language settings, or left to right, right to left. Script support, like Arabic languages. It has to support accessibility, extensibility, and theming, which is basically, there are some default themes that we are providing, but then obviously the very first thing that every customer wants to do is just to redefine this theme to match, either corporate fonts or corporate colors. I will not be going into the theme designer right now. I just pasted the link here, but you can see that, it just allows you to build the themes which change the way application is displayed depending on just playing with these themes. So here are some examples of our kind of like real applications. So it is again either very traditional business process support applications like account receivables, or the other one for travel expense management. And believe me, like Poland is such a small SAP company that I still have to use this old SAP GUI interface that I showed you at the very beginning, and still feel the pain of working with this, while, for example, Germans in our company already using this nice interface. This is another example of the production application. Unfortunately, I cannot kind of like demo all of them to you in the live manner, but just to give you an example what you can really build besides just buttons and scroll bars and lists with this. Actually, one of the German teams, I don't remember the name, because it is like, this one of these 25 German letters in random order, but they are, for example, during trainings, they are putting this, sensors into players' shoes and into the ball, and then they have obviously UI just to monitor how players are behaving, and this UI is built, surprise, surprise, using the UI5 technology. This is just some more screenshots. And one of our very first, very liked applications. I believe, I don't know if you hear the sound, but it just even produces the sound, and yeah, it is built in OpenUI5 as well. Just to kind of like show you that that there is something more that you can do with this library. And if you do not believe me, remember Ctrl-Alt-Shift-S, and you can see the technical information about the code that is behind this, right? So, for example, the control tree, so you have the Pac-Man, you have the ghost, you have the other ghost. They are all controls, UI5 controls in there. Okay. As I mentioned, at the beginning we created this as a commercial software, but then we have quite a strong community who saw this like this, and they kept pushing SAP that you need to make this open source. And this is where in December last year we made OpenUI5 available, but not for contribution, but under this Apache, I believe one of the Apache licenses. And as I mentioned, from last month you can as well fork the source on GitHub, and not just use it, but as well contribute to it. So try it, join the community. Here are some links to the web, to the GitHub, to this demo kit that I posted. You can find as well on Twitter some updates with OpenUI5 Twitter handle. And here is just the thank to my German colleagues who helped to put some of the demos together and to display these German players to you as well. So thank you. I believe we are at the top of our hour of presentation. And are there any questions?
What is the size of the library?
The size of the library, this is the good question. So you're afraid that it is just as big as our thin client, right? Like about 1 gigabyte. Sorry, I didn't check it before that. And I probably should have it somewhere. We can check, but basically I just don't want to look into all these subfolders trying to find it out. But it is downloadable.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned reactive UI. I saw that it reacted to updating the screen, but does it also react to changing the module?
Mm-hmm.
Like right now I saw Angular JS. Is it using Angular or?
No, it is not using Angular JS, but there are some people who are looking how these two can coexist, right? So Angular JS is obviously very powerful, very well known library, which we do not try to obviously replace, but there are some people in our community, and actually if you search on the web, you will find some examples of using Angular JS with OpenUI5, or you will find Bootstrap used with OpenUI5 or some other libraries being used together, just to kind of like to see how they can coexist.
But is it doing data binding to UI or not? How is this updating UI work out?
I mean, this data binding is using JS data library. And we put this as a part of kind of like of our library, this whole data binding. So it is our magic.
A question about, can you opt out for certain features if you only need, for example, to show the map, you only need the sliders for something, it's wise to use OpenUI5, or can you just get these modules to keep the weight down?
Yep. So basically, here was an example. So there is a Bootstrap, like our for OpenUI5, and then you are defining the libraries which you will be using from OpenUI5. So yes, they are grouped in libraries, and then you can pick only those that you really need.
And another question, how mature is the project? Do you see any breaking changes coming in the future? Troubles upgrading to 2.0 or whatever version is live right now?
So right now I believe it is 124. Again, Control Alt Shift S. So 124. But basically, as I mentioned, this library we've been using internally already for 3 or 4 years, but as a closed source library. And I mean, it is constantly being developed, but I do not expect that, all the applications that we rolled out that are using this library will go away just because, we introduce some change that will make this previous version non-workable. Thank you.